In 2019, YouTube was caught violating the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. Since settling, YouTube has enacted new policies that are meant to serve as a smokescreen so they can dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators. As such, for my own protection, it is my obligation to advise you that this video is not aimed at children. My target audience is not children. Parental discretion is advised. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Our look at Dark Shadows, the horror collections, continues with The Lost Girl, released in July of 2011, written by D. Lynn Smith, directed by Darren Gross. The Lost Girl stars Catherine Lee Scott as Josette Du Pres and Rebecca Stab as Emily. As always, I'll be talking spoilers, so if you're interested in listening to this story, in the description box below is the link to Big Finish's website. I've included the link to The Lost Girl, which you can buy individually, and I've included the link to the Horror Collection bundle, which it is a part of. And so, as I mentioned in my last review, in last week's review, The Lost Girl is a direct sequel to Final Judgment. In fact, I would honestly say that this is actually a two-part story. But if I were to say something, I think I prefer Final Judgment over The Lost Girl. It's not a very big preference. It's not a very big gap between the stories. There's no dips in quality or anything. If I was ranking these, I would say The Lost Girl is weaker just by half a point. And that really, for me, boils down to preferences. I don't have as far as characters go, I don't have a strong preference for Josette. I don't dislike her. I don't hate her, but I'm just neutral on her. And of the two characters Catherine Lee Scott plays, I prefer Maggie more. So anyway, as I mentioned, at the end of Final Judgment, Josette loses her trial against Angelique and is sent to hell, and that's where the Lost Girl begins. She is going to begin her eternal damnation. She finds herself once again at Collinwood at Widow's Hill, where she meets her tormentor, Emily. Wow, I just totally ghosted over that, the significance of that. She finds herself at Collinwood at Widow's Hill, the site where she killed herself, where she meets her tormentor, her would-be tormentor, Emily. However, before her eternity of suffering can begin, someone intervenes on Josette's behalf. I don't know who it is, it's never said. I kind of like the ambiguity of it, but I wonder if this ties into another story. Either way, that's not important. So now, Josette has to be put through a test. She has to look at 3 instances in her life and sort of realize what actually happened. What is the truth of what she's looking at? She has to come to these realizations about claims she made at Angelique's trial in the last story. And if she can find the truth in all 3 of them, look, I'm going to be honest, it's been about a week since I've heard these stories. I probably should again, but I moved on to other things, so a lot of this is from memory. Excuse me if I take long pauses or gaps because I'm trying to recall what happened. But anyway, so Josette is going to look at 3 instances of her life about claims she made during Angelique's trial. And if she can find the truth of these memories, and if she can find all 3 in under an hour, her soul will be redeemed and she will be allowed to move on to heaven. And like I said, this is a really good character study for Josette. Like I said in Final Judgment, if I could find the best way to describe her, it would be aggressively naive. And this story really plays with that. She's forced to look at her life and realize it's not what she thought it was. Like, for instance, one of her first tests is... Sorry, it's a little hot today. I have my window open, and it's kind of windy out, and that's what you're hearing. You're hearing the wind blow against my door here. Anyway, so one of the first memories Josette looks at is her time with Jeremiah before they returned to Collinwood and he and Barnabas had their duel. And because Josette asserted at the trial that she and Jeremiah never really loved each other. It was simply a spell put on them both by Angelique. To which Emily, who goes from tormentor to guide, says that Jeremiah did truly love Josette. He damned himself to wander the earth. He damned his soul to wander the earth for the sole purpose of watching over her. And of course, as she looks on this and realizes what happened, she realizes, yes, she did actually love Jeremiah. And that's what all of these three memories are. It is her coming to terms with the reality of her situation. And I will take this in. Should I keep going or should I talk about Emily? I do want to talk about Emily. She's a one-off, strictly exclusive to this story, but she is such a fascinating character. And for an hour-long story, and this being the only time we meet Emily, she's used really effectively. That by the time we reach the end of the story, you do feel for her, which is admittedly not something that always happens with one-off characters. It's done really well. I just don't know where to talk about her specific arc and her role in this story. And then in her next memory, we see Josette's aunt, the Countess Natalie Du Pres, who mourning Josette's death. And of course, Josette says if she could go back and do everything again, she would do things differently so that her aunt wouldn't have to suffer. And then Emily, of course, shows her what happened after she died. Because Natalie was a very selfish, very vain, very cold woman, you know. And Josette said that it was because she knew the jealousy her position begat. So she sort of locked her heart away to prevent, you know, that these kinds of things. Damn, sorry, I kind of jumbled up what I was trying to say. Natalie was a very cold, very vain, almost selfish woman, and she realized the kind of jealousy a woman in her position, a woman of her status, begat. So she locked her heart away to prevent, you know, no, I don't know how to finish that phrase. I'm sorry. But you get what I'm trying to say about Natalie, right? Anyway, what happened after Josette's death is Natalie sort of opened a hospital or a halfway house. She opened a women's shelter where various women would, you know, come in seeking help and it would be given to them. And Natalie spent her entire fortune. She sold her priceless jewels, her, you know, priceless family heirlooms to keep this shelter going, which is when Josette realizes the second truth. As much as it hurts the people around her, as much as she wants to go back and take that pain away, ultimately her passing created more good. And I guess this is now where I'll talk about Emily. Like I said, Emily is a fascinating character. She's basically a foil to Josette. Whereas Josette was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. She had everything, and by Emily's own words, she threw it all away by killing herself. Emily had nothing, and everything she ever got in her life, she had to fight for. And Emily cannot understand how Josette could just throw everything away. And once we learn more about Emily's past, it really creates this interesting dynamic between them both. Like, there's this really brutal scene where Emily's talking about her past, and she mentions that she was from a very poor. She grew up with a very poor family. She had a younger sister and both were raised by a single mother. And when her mother met a new man, he said he would not take both daughters. So her mother, again, this is really dark stuff. Her mother said because Emily was older, she could look after herself. And many years later, when they were both grown up, Emily found her sister again and killed her. And it's just, again, Emily is such a fascinating character. I wish we could see more of her in some way, but That's not important. And then ultimately, Josette's narrative. Actually, if there is one thing I kind of have an issue with, it is sort of the format of this story because it is just two people. It is Josette and Emily. So a lot of what happens, it's Josette narrating it. And when they look at her memories, it works, because so many times in these memories, Emily is asking Josette what she sees, and Josette recounts it. But whenever it's set in the present, um, that's where it's a little bit weaker. It comes off as sort of similar to David Lynch's Dune. When he was adapting Frank Herbert's novel, the way Lynch adapted most of the prose into the film is he had it done in voiceover narration, the thought process. And that's what a lot of The Lost Girl comes off as being. I also have issues with the very end, but stick a pin in that, we'll get back to it. Anyway, after passing the first two tests, Josette now has to assess her relationship with both Barnabas and Angelique. And I believe what we see first is an alternate reality. I don't know if it actually happened in the show or not, because I'm not that far, but she sees what would have happened had she not killed herself, had she stayed with Barnabas. And we see that Josette was turned into a vampire. And in this alternate reality, Josette herself actually kills Emily. And then we cut to Collinwood. And they never say what it is, but it's very clear it is Collinwood. And we see the present day, where Barnabas has abducted Maggie, who is Josette's reincarnation, and he is sort of forcing her to be Josette. And this is when Josette comes to the third realization that her and Barnabas may have loved each other once, but over the centuries, Barnabas's love has turned into an obsession, and his feelings for her are creating more pain than anything. And with that, we see the entire love triangle between Barnabas, Josette, and Angelique. By keeping this going, they are all three, Barnabas, Josette, and Angelique, in a hell of their own making. Barnabas being obsessed with Josette, Angelique pining for a love that will never be reciprocated, and Josette caught in the middle, between a woman she views as her sister and the man they both love. And finally, at the end, after realizing these truths, Josette finally moves on to. Josette passes the tests and moves on to the afterlife. And we're back to the ending here. It's nothing with the ending itself. It's fine. It's the sound design I have an issue with. Because at this point, as Josette is moving on, she's trying to bring Emily with her. And the sound design kind of evolves into just noise, and it makes it very hard to determine what's going on. And the music too, because as this entire, let's be honest, really happy moment is happening, Josette is going to heaven, the music is very dark and very melancholy. It's kind of trying to create a bittersweet moment. So it makes it unclear what's actually going on. Like, basically, in regards to Emily, that is, it's like, did she bring Emily with her? Is Emily doomed to stay in hell? It's not made clear what happened there. But overall, The Lost Girl is a really good story. It provides a fascinating look into a character I just admitted I'm not very fond of. And I do recommend this as a whole story with Final Judgment. But that's it for The Lost Girl. So join me next week when we'll be shifting gears and taking a look at Amy Jennings, starting with The Lucifer Gambit. But those were just my thoughts on The Lost Girl. What did you think? Start a conversation in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. In the description box below, you'll find the link to my Ko-fi, where you can support the channel, and you'll find the link to my Twitter where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. Excuse me. This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and I'll see you guys next time.